let me know. And as I said, I'm now turning on the recording, so you'll have a copy of it. All right, so we're going to go over cell fills, merging and wrapping text, which will include answering a question Jennifer emailed me about this morning. What if you have more columns than don't naturally fit on a page? What are some of the ways that you could shrink it down? And we're going to look at some of that. And then we'll do some basic analysis, and we'll keep it pretty basic today. Next time I'll take it a little further. And then I'm going to show you some kind of cool stuff with count functions, min and max, data validation, which is essentially drop-down menus. And you'll see them a little earlier on, but at that point I'll show you how to do it, some basic table sorting, and then the simplest of the time functions, which again, when we do our second session, I'll add a little bit more detail, probably in the areas of count functions and time functions and things like that. So we'll get started with the most basic thing and one of my favorites, which is cell fills. So we're just going to look at how, and some of you may or may not know this. I know you're all at different levels on this, but we're just going to look for a minute at cell fills. So let's say that I have here 1 and 2. If I then highlight those cells and I go to the corner and I drag it down, I'll get my series of numbers. And that can be very helpful if you have to do any kind of a thing where you're going to number items. So the interesting is, let's see how smart Excel is. What if we do 1, 3, and again, I have to highlight at least 2 cells because otherwise it won't know whether I want the series or I just want, just a series of ones. So I need to at least give it 2 so it knows what I'm doing. And as you'll see, it gives me every even number. I could do 1, 5, and it'll give me 5, 10, 15. So that can be very helpful. Okay, that's kind of the most basic one. Let's look at a couple of other ones of fills. Here's one. Now here, I believe you only need 1, okay? And I'll find out in a minute if I'm correct. Yeah, you only need 1. So if you pick days of the week, it'll just give you a series of days of the week. So let's take a look at another one of this. If I do Monday, M-O-N, like an abbreviation, yeah, it will abbreviate, which again might save me some space. Okay, let's see what else I can do. What if I do January? There we go. Okay? So I think you could probably all guess this. If I do so it abbreviates. Pretty cool, right? How many of you are familiar with that? Anybody? And if you were, just say yes so I know. And if you were not, tell me no. Okay. All right. So just give me a second to clear this because I want to show you one other one. That's my favorite one. And very handy, actually. It's fighting me. Okay. Oh, that's why. Okay. Too many things at once. I'm not going to worry about it. Sometimes when I'm running everything at once, I get a little freeze up, so I think I'm having that. Let's see. Okay, there we go. Yeah, it just needs a little time. Okay, so let's look at one more, which is an interesting one. Okay. Now here, you want to definitely do at least 2 of them. Now you'll notice, by the way, when I went to do the second one, it just repeated. That's another kind of nice feature if you're doing something. But what if, again, if I want like a series? So now I'm going to highlight the 2 of them. And I'm going to drag down. And notice it gave me the items. By the way, I'm going to close a couple of things because I'm running into a little bit of issues. So notice if I have text and a number, it will just give me the series of the numbers. So this could be check number, PO number, student ID number, anything where you might want to include in the cell also some text in addition to the number of series. Any of you who do fills, did you know that? And the reason I'm asking you is I like to try to get a little feedback to know whether or not this stuff is something people commonly know or not. So yes, no, are we familiar with that? Okay. Okay, moving right along. This is where I can answer the question that Jennifer had before about how do you manage space a little bit more effectively. So to do that, I need to just share with you a little bit about how Excel handles text versus numbers where the item extends beyond the size of the cell. Okay? So in our first example here, and I already did it just to save a little bit of time, I typed in the rain in Spain falls mainly, I could have had mainly on the plane. Now you'll notice that extended beyond the length of the cell, and what Excel simply did was to carry over to the next cell. Now the date is actually in this cell, but it'll carry over provided there's nothing in that second cell. If there's anything in the cell, then it'll truncate it. So if I have like a number 1 in there, now it'll truncate. If it's blank, it will not. You know, it'll if I delete it, it'll stay, it'll just extend beyond. That's how it handles text. When it comes to numbers, it handles it slightly differently, and that's what I want to share with you. Okay. Just actually hold on one second. I just want to see if there's anything else I can shut down. No, I'm all right. Yeah, because I'm starting to get a few rolling balls too. Okay, so here, if you have numbers and they don't fit in the cell, and I'm just going to show you because I actually purposely widened the cell so it would be wide enough. What you can get is that. How many of you have ever seen that? The dreaded pound signs. Anyone? And you'll get the dreaded pound signs whenever the size of the number is larger than the width of the column. So there's a couple ways you can deal with that. Obviously, one of the ways is you can go and manually go into the cell and change the font size. And you got to keep trialing and erroring till you get it right. Still doesn't work. Okay. Okay, there we go. Works, right? That's an awful lot of work and a pain in the neck. Okay? Wouldn't it be great if there were an easier way to do that? And there is. Okay? So this is an especially large number, so I don't want to make this too crazy. But let me just show you the way you can do this. So the way you do it is you right-click. Now, you can also do it through the menu, through Format, but the easiest way is to right-click. If you right-click, you're going to see Format Cells. When you go to Format Cells, I already had done it before, so remember, you'll probably get this first, but you want to go to the item that says Alignment, and you want to go down to Text Control and go Shrink to Fit. So you click Shrink to Fit. Now watch what happens. So first I'm actually going to extend my my column wide. So if I extend my column wide, no matter how wide I make my column, the numbers will never be larger than the point size, than the font size. So it doesn't matter how big the columns are, it'll always remain at that font size. But look what happens when I make the columns smaller. So far it's still the same. What do you see happening to the number? It's getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Now, obviously, there's a practical limitation to this, to where you can't see it. But a lot of times, this can be just a really handy thing to have set if you just need a small adjustment so you don't have to do trial and error. So do you want me to show you how to do that again? Just show you how you select it? Okay. All right. So I'm going to just unselect it and select it so you can see. Okay? And it's like a toggle. You can unselect it or select it. I'm going to go to Format Cells, to Alignment, and on the bottom, I'm going to select, I would have had it underpressed, I'm going to select Shrink to Fit. And that's all I have to do. And now once I do Shrink to Fit, then as my columns get narrower, it's going to automatically reduce the size of the item. Okay, so let me show you that in action. So right here, I'll just make this slightly smaller so you can see it. Okay, so right here I have a little spreadsheet of data, and I tried to make it something that might relate to you. Okay, so it basically was diploma completion rates. And by the way, I know it's ridiculous. You couldn't have 140% completion rate unless you were considering students that had re-entered. So ignore the logic of it. Let's just look at what goes on here. And this is exactly an example of the kind of thing that Jennifer was talking about. Maybe this is not that many columns, but maybe this is too big. By the way, just a piece of statistical data, you know, you can go out up to 256 columns on a spreadsheet. And that's well and good if you're trying to develop some sort of back-end data table. But if you have to do reports, there's a practical limitation to that, because at some point you got to be able to print it. And where the problem lies is in having too many columns, okay, that are taking too much space, where if you're then going to try to shrink the spreadsheet, everything's going to be a little too small, okay? So let me show you what you can do here. The first thing you do, just as a natural consequence of your work, is you go and you select all the cells, because you don't have to do it just for one cell. And again, you're going to right-click, you're going to go to Format Cells, and you're going to select Shrink to Fit. And hit OK. I just want to make sure I got it selected. Shrink to Fit. Now watch what happens. Maybe I've tried to print this thing and it's just a little too big. So now I shrink it down, right? And by the way, the big limitation here are not the numbers. It's the southeast. The southeast is causing the column to be larger than it needs to be. So watch what happens when I shrink it. Notice what it did. It did what to southeast? It reduced the size. And the same here, okay? And the same here. And here. Now, let's look about this one item here, this 140. Okay. So if I try to shrink that really small, and again, forget the title for a moment, because that would probably be a limiting factor here. What I would probably do with the title is put it into two rows, so it's south and east. But notice here, all the other numbers were not changed, just the 140, because that was larger. And sometimes I can live with that. I can live with, you know, all of my data and one item being slightly smaller. It might not even be that big a deal on a report. And that might be the way that I can thread my needle to get all of my space on one page. So let me stop. Any questions on that? Okay. And Jennifer, do you see how you might use that? Okay, so that's what I would do, and then play around, and then you got to decide what you can live with. You know what I mean? But like a good example here is I would definitely put this, you know, I would take southeast and try to put it on two, you know, in two columns or widen the column down. But on the numbers, that would work. Okay? All right, so I want to just show you a couple of other things with shrink to fit. And I think this is not shrink to fit, but with formatting and wrapping, and that is, you know, I was an accountant before I did anything else, before I did staff development. And one of the things I learned, and I was an accountant a long time ago too, by the way, okay. So I was a pen and pencil accountant, you know, going back to the days when we had analysis pads on paper, you know. And one of the things that my bosses, the partners, always insisted was that we had good documentation on our worksheets because, you know, you're going to look back at something 6 months later, you're not going to remember what you did. So the idea of having a little box somewhere where you could have information, that's going to be critical. And so what I'm going to do is show you how you create a box. Now, I've created one here. This is already a comment box. So I just want to show you how you create that because there's a couple of steps. The first thing you want to do is select an area. You don't want it below or above. You want it either to the side of or diagonal to your data. And you're going to select a bunch of cells, and you're going to do merge. You can do, by the way, you have a few options here, but a lot of times I just hit merge and center, and then I fix it. So if you're going to merge and center, and then I've got to make two changes. One, I've got to tell it to start at the top of the box, and then I've got to tell it that I want it left justified. And I want it to wrap. That should be automatically that it'll wrap. Now what you're going to see is once I do that, I have a box that I can type in, and I don't feel like typing all the way across. But if I did, I'll end up with something that looks like this. Now, you can't put any returns in. You can do spaces. If you hit a return, it'll take you out of the box. But just this idea of commonly putting in comment boxes, always a good idea. And one way to distinguish it as a comment box is also to give it, you know, a unique and distinctive color for the box. So you want to be in the box, and then you want to go out to your fills. Okay, fighting me a little bit here. Begin it. Rolling ball. And then I can go up here and select, you know, a color for my box. All right, so any questions on how you do that? So how many of you put dialog boxes or text boxes somewhere where you can write notes to yourself or notes to other people in your spreadsheets? Do you do that now? Always a good idea, because it's amazing. You pick up something 6 months later, you can't remember what you did, okay? So always a good idea. All right, so let's look a little at some basic analysis. Okay, so what I have here is, you know, a pretty common thing you'd see in industry, which is just or even in the public sector, which is just a little expense report, or actually it's just expense by month, all right? So I want to just show you the most common functions in Excel and talk about them. So I'm going to actually take this out first and show you how you do the most common function. So the most common function in Excel is sum. And basically it's equal sum and the range. Close parentheses, and that's going to give you the total, okay? Now, if you notice here, I had totals for all of the columns because I had done this before. I'm just going to take them out, or at least take a couple of them out. Now, the other thing that you can do with cell fills is you can also use it to copy across formulas. So what I do is I select the cell that has the sum, and I'm going to copy across, and it's going to then populate my answers. Now, this is called relative copying. And the reason why I say it's called relative copying is it copied the formula, but it assumed that because I was moving from the left to the right, that I intended not for it to give me the sum of this column, but to give me the sum of this column and the total column. And you will see that in the formulas. So if you look here, it says equals sum B4 to B12. Here it says equals sum C4 to C12, because I'm in the C column. Here it says D4 to D12, and here it says E4 to E12. This is a wonderful characteristic of Excel because, the sum formula, I'll do it again, is, it's a really easy one, equals sum, open parentheses, and then select the range. Now you can actually, write it in, but the easiest way is just highlight it and then press enter. Okay, did you get that, Allie? Okay, everybody good? All right, so now I'm going to show you a few other functions, and again, I had them written already, but I'll show them to you anyway. So this gives you the sum, that's total. This gives you the largest item. It's called max, and the function is just equal max, and it gives you the largest item. So here, I'll just do it in this column to show you. Again, so you do equals max, and then I highlight my range. It's, by the way, going to be a different number because the largest one here is an 800. Close parentheses. It's going to give me 800. Okay? Now, once again, because of relative copying, if I wanted to copy it across, I would go across, and those give me what? My largest item. So if I wanted to know each month what was my largest expense item, I could do it that way. All right? Any questions on that? So if there's a maximum, there has to be a what? A minimum, and the minimum is what? The lowest item. Okay? So again, just so you can see me do it again, min, I'm going to select my range and hit enter, and it's going to give me my lowest items. And because I don't want to have to keep doing this over and over again, I am going to do what? I'm going to do relative copying, and I'm going to copy it across. And there we go. I got my lowest item. See, if you look at the list, you'll see the lowest item here was 20. I can make this slightly smaller. See? And the lowest item here was 11, and the lowest item here was 120. Questions? Okay. So everybody okay with that? All right, so now we have the one average, and by the way, you cannot do AVG. You gotta spell out average, okay? Because there's just a lot of AVG type formulas. Once again, go here, go down, and that's going to give me my average expenditure, and then again I can go across, and that tells me what my average is. Okay? So the last one of the most common formulas is count. And that's just equal count, which in this case should be all the same for all of them. And I'm going to be lazy here and just show it to you. It's equal count and the range, and then copy it over, and we would expect to get a 9 for all of the items. But watch what happens here. If I take one of the items out, let's say the 67, notice this is going to be an 8. Or if there were no 20, that's going to change my minimum too, because this, changes the minimum. Actually, there's another 20, so it didn't. Okay? So it could, if I were missing items or there were fewer items, it's going to show a lower number. Okay? Any questions on that? Okay. All right. So we're going to come back and do one more count function before we end today. I'm going to show you an interesting use of count. I think minimum, maximum, average makes sense to people. Count doesn't always until you're shown a good example. But before I do that, I want to just teach you one more thing that's really important about this copying. Remember I mentioned relative copying? Well, we're going to talk about when we don't want that and when we do want it. So let's start with a basic example here just to make the point. Now, again, I'm going to clear a couple items out. I should have cleared it first, but I used it before. So. Fighting me. I'm getting the dreaded ball. I hate the beach ball. Okay. And that's because I'm running Excel and trying to run the meeting at the same time. You never know. It's all just do it. Okay. So here we have a very simple budget estimate. So if I want to know if these are my actual monthlies for expenditures, what would be the quarterly and what's the annual? So the numbers are nice and simple. I could have built it into the formula, but I purposely have a point that may come out later where you may want the number in another reference item that you want to refer to. So let's see what happens here. So I want to basically do 1,000 times 3, okay? So I'm going to do equals. I'm going to select this cell times 3. I'm sorry, times, I messed up, put the wrong thing. It shouldn't be that. It should be a times. And we'll talk about that, okay? And that worked, right? Everybody got that? Now, let's see what happens when I go, everybody good? Let's see what happens when I go to do relative copying. Something went wrong. Didn't work. So the question is, why didn't it work? Okay. And the answer is, it didn't work because Excel did relative copying. So what happened here is it worked on the first one because it said 1,000 times 3. But when I copied down, it didn't assume to look at this cell. It assumed that I wanted to look at this cell and this cell and this cell because I was copying down. And just to prove it, look what happens here when I put 3s in all of these columns, in all of these rows. Okay, so now it works. But what if I don't want to do that? What if I wanted to just refer to that, that one cell? How do I get it to do it? And the answer is I have to teach you one more thing, and that's where this is kind of the lead up to explaining what comes next here as soon as the ball stops rolling. Okay, is this notion of relative reference, absolute reference, and mixed reference. Okay, so the default is relative reference. What that means in the simplest terms are, if I go across with my fill, it'll assume I want to move, if I'm on, say, the C column, then I want to move to the D column or the E column. And if I'm copying down, it'll assume I want to go from 22 to 23 to 24 or to 25. And in most cases, when you're doing what we were doing here before, that's exactly what you want. However, here I want to reference a particular item. So I actually could do this particular one either way, absolute reference or mixed reference. And I want to explain what the difference is. So what I'm doing with absolute reference is I'm saying I want you to lock both the row and the column. So whether I copy across or I copy down, lock both, okay? That's an absolute reference. So this is lock nothing, this is lock everything. Mix says lock one or the other. So if I want to lock the column but let the rows get copied down, I would do this one. If I wanted to keep the columns would move but keep the rows locked, I'll do this one. So I probably should have just started by explaining what you actually do, and it's the simplest thing. You do the exact same cell range, but around it you put dollar signs. So instead of having it look like B4, you'll have $B, $4, or $B and just a 4, or B and just a 4. So here's for those of you who are inexperienced, this is the challenge question. So the question is this: what do I need here? Because you can do a mixed reference. Which of these two mixed references would work? Do I need to lock the column or do I need to lock the row? And take a shot. Guess. Anybody want to guess? One brave soul. That's correct. I need to lock the row. Absolutely. Because what am I doing? I'm copying down. Now, I'm actually going to do an absolute here because generally if I'm looking to refer to a particular one cell, I would really lock them both down. However, you can get away with it. Later on, you'll see some examples where you may want to lock only one versus the other. So how do you do it? What's the process? The normal process I undertake, and I think it's just the proper way to go, as you're starting, if you're starting this out, and again, I'll start from scratch, is the first thing I would do is do it just for the one item. So I'm going to do equals 1,000 times that cell. Good. Now I see it work. Now I go back in and I lock the reference to here. So this is G20. So all I do is I just go back into the cell and I put a $sign by the G and a $sign by the 20. Now, they're not going to see any change in this number. It's going to look exactly the same because whether it was relative or absolute, you would have gotten the same result. But look what happens when I copy down. It worked. Now, I could show you one more example with annual, but I want to move on and show you some other stuff. So everybody okay with that? And don't worry if some of the stuff you forget it. I mean, that's the nice thing about having the recording. You'll be able to go back and just look at the recording again. Okay, so let's go on and look at some additional count functions, because I said I was going to show you some kind of cooler uses of count functions. Okay, so how many of you are responsible in one way or another of keeping track of whether things have been submitted, like reports, etc.? So this particular example I just picked one, out of the blue, was an example of a form you might use in an HR department to keep track of whether or not you had all this complete information on each employee. Everybody got it? Now, before we do this, I just have to show you one more thing I didn't show you yet. So remember we did count, and I'll just give you. Remember as in 2 minutes ago, 5 minutes ago? So we did 1, 2, 4. I'll just pick one more number. 6. Okay, so if I want to do a count function, this is the count column, just so you can see it. There were 4 items. I'm just going to label it. Okay? Now, that's fine, but only works with numbers. Look what happens here. Apples. Notice it does not count apples. It just treats it as not a count. Okay? So if I had here I'm just changing it back, I had here a 4, this would be 4. But if I have ball, It doesn't work. Got it? So I have to do a slightly different formula. It looks almost the same. Instead of count, I do count A. And again, I'll just show you what that looks like here. So you can see it bigger. It's just a regular count with A, and then my range. Okay? So now, if I do count A rather than count, yeah, it won't matter whether it's a number or a text. It'll work with either. The only way it won't do the count is if the cell's blank. Okay, so that was count A. Let's just put this here so you can see it. So I want to just show you one more formula. It's count blank. And so it's just the same. It's just equals and my range and this will count the item or the blank column. So for example here, I have 3 columns with numbers, but I have 1 that's blank. And it may be a little bit easier to see if I put the blank in the middle. Okay? So right now I have 0 blanks. But if this item had nothing in it, it's going to show up as 3 and 1. Okay? So I know that was a long-winded thing, but let me show you how you might use this. Okay, so now I have this table, and the basic purpose of the table is to see what's missing. And by the way, I've made this a little bit easier. I put some drop-down menus in it. I'll show you later on how you create those. But there's either I got it or I didn't. It's either submitted or not. So as I get the item, I'm sitting in the HR department, I just put it as submitted, and I click enter, and this is making me crazy because it's sluggish today. So notice what's happening over here. As the items are being entered, it's telling me how many missing items I have. So for example, if they're all complete, I've got everything. I should have what? No missing items. So I can immediately look and see I'm missing 1 item from this person, I'm missing 3 items from that person, etc. Or I can also do it down the column. I can tell how many were submitted and how many were missing. So right now, for insurance forms, I have 9 that are missing and 1 that's been done. Watch what happens when I enter an item. Okay, any questions on that? So this can be very handy if you need to keep track, like in the library, of how many books are outstanding or how many items were submitted or what's out. There are actually a lot of uses, but this is just an example of how you might use a count function. Okay? And here I use count A and count blank. The items done were count A, and the items missing are count blank. Okay? Everybody good? All right. Moving right along. Actually, I want to go back to basic analysis for a minute and give you all a little math question. Okay, so we're back to math class here again, and we have this problem. 5 plus 6 times 2. Now, I've written it out the way you would see it written out normally. The way you would do it, obviously, in Excel is this way. But just looking at the way we write it out, the question is, what's the answer to this? So I want you to calculate what you think the answer is, and then put it in the chat box. We have a lot of chicken people here. Give it a shot. No harm. This is the kind of questions every once in a while I see like on Facebook. Okay? All right. Okay, well, yes, if you put the parentheses, it would change the answer. Okay, so the answer here actually happens to be 17 because of this thing called order of operation, okay? And I don't know if they taught this to you in Mississippi, but when in New York City where I went to school, they used to use I think they call it an acronym, something that'll help you remember it. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Did they use that in Mississippi? Okay. And that is parentheses, exponent, multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Okay? Okay. Well, at least we did North Carolina. That's good. Okay. So, by the way, just that kind of works. The truth of it is that actually there are some pairs. So, for example, multiplication and division, order does not matter. So you could have done division before multiplication or multiplication and division. But you can't do addition before you do multiplication. Okay, so they're kind of in pairs. But since it worked that way, that's the way they wrote it out. But anyway, so in this particular case, we would do the multiplication first, and that would be 6 times 2 equals 12, and then plus 5. And let's see if Excel knows. So again, I'm just going to write it. I know the answer, obviously, but okay. Okay, and the answer is 17. Now, for who is it who said, for Kelly, you're right. If I wanted it to be 22, then I obviously would do it again, and this time I would do what? Parentheses, 5 plus 6. So I'm telling it do that first, and then times 2, and then I'm going to get 22. Okay? I only do that with you because every once in a while, if people forget this, they're wondering why they got a wrong answer. So Excel does know order of operation, and that's just another important piece to have in your toolbox if you're familiar, because occasionally it fouls people up. Okay, so we learned about the minimum and the maximum function before, right? And that didn't seem to have an awful lot of uses, but I want to show you kind of an interesting use. And by the way, in the way I did this formula before, I had a range. But you don't have to only do ranges with any of these items. You can either do a range or you can do a series. So, for example, if I did the following, this is just a simple example. If I did minimum and I said 5, 2, it's going to give me the smaller of 5 or 2. Do you follow? And I could have also done that as cell references. So you don't have to necessarily only look at the lower range. It could be choosing between 2 choices. Everybody okay? And the example we're going to do involves that. So I wrote you a little scenario that you might see in an HR in a university. So here's the scenario. By the way, this is exactly, my girlfriend's an RN. This is actually exactly how she's compensated, okay, based on a model like this. Okay, she works for a hospital. So what it says is the state contract specifies that campus security staff be paid the higher of the actual hours or 4-hour minimum for any on-call assignment due to special events on campus. This spreadsheet determines the pay using the max function. And I'm assuming the hourly rate is $25 an hour. So what does that mean? You get called in and you work 2 hours, you still get paid for 4. Because there's a 4-hour minimum. If you work 5 hours, you get paid for 5 hours. So if you work 1 hour, you get paid for 4 hours. You work 2 hours, you get paid for 4. You work 5 hours, you get paid for 5. Everybody understand the basic idea? Yes? No? Okay. So now let me show you how this formula works. So what I have here is, this is just a list of the events, right? This is the actual hours the security person put in. And what I want to determine is, what is their paid hours? How many hours am I actually going to pay them that then I can multiply by the rate? So the operative column is this one, and I want to show you the formula. And I can try to blow it up so you can see it here. Okay. That wasn't so good. Let me show it to you over here. I think you can see it. So basically what it says is equals max, the actual hours, or 4. And here I just threw the 4 in because it's not going to change. It's always 4. So what it's going to do is it's going to take the higher of either the actual hours or 4 hours. And so let's see what happens in a couple of different cases based on, and again, once I did it for one row, I could simply copy down the formula. All right. Okay. Hang on one second. I just want to. Okay. Just to make it a little more visible, easy. Okay. So watch what happens here. And I'm just going to take you through all the possibilities here. All right. So it's 1 hour. Get paid for 4, right? Maybe I won't take you through all the possibilities. 3 hours. Get paid for 4. 5 hours, get paid for 5. Everybody got it? 6 hours, get paid for what? 6. So what fouls people up in thinking about this is you get a minimum number of hours, but I'm using the maximum function. Okay? So people go, it doesn't make any sense. If it's a minimum, why am I not using the minimum function? Because the minimum hours actually set, you want to take the higher of either the minimum or the actual hours. So you need a max function. Okay? All right, so we're going to look at one more of those. So in this particular case, I just changed the scenario a little bit here, and in this scenario, there's a day rate. So you get paid the higher of, or the lower of your hourly rate or your day rate. So if the hourly goes above the day rate, you get paid the day rate, okay? And the day rate is 110. So what happens here is you have to calculate the pay by hours. And that's just 3 times 25 or 2 times 25. Then you have the day rate, and then you're going to compare. You're going to get paid the lower of these two. So I'm going to use a minimum function, and it's going to compare the day rate to the hourly rate. And in this particular case, since the hourly was lower than the day rate, the person got 75. So let's see what happens. If they work 2 hours, they're going to get 50. If they work 5 hours, they're tapped out at that day rate. They don't get 125, they get 110. Okay? So those are just a couple of interesting uses of minimum and maximum. Any questions on minimum and maximum? Trust me, it actually has a lot of uses. Okay, so now there's something really cool. Okay. Data, it's called conditional formatting. So what I have here are kids' test scores. These are the names of the students. I only use their first name. And here was their various tests. And so what I'm going to show you is, and there really are a lot of them, I'm just going to show you a few so you can get an idea and then you can play on your own. So I'm going to highlight my range of tests. And I'm not picking the totals here. And I'm going to go to conditional formatting, which is up right on the home ribbon. So you shouldn't have any problem finding it. And I'm going to go to highlight cell rules. I lost my range. Let me do it again. Conditional formatting. Highlight rules. And I've got a whole bunch of rules. I've got greater than, less than, equal to, text that contains. In this particular case, I'm going to use greater than, but I could certainly use less than to accomplish the same thing, okay? And just a bit of advice, if you're going to do greater than, you always want to start with your lowest band, and I know that doesn't make any sense yet. It will in a minute when I go over what I mean, okay? So what the best way to explain it would be, if I want to create like bands of different colors for each range, if I'm doing greater, I want to start with the lowest band, so the lower scores. If I'm doing less than, I would start with the higher scores and move down. So I'm just going to do greater than now. And I'm going to get this dialog box. And basically what it says is all the cells that are greater than this particular whatever number I'm selecting, and you can, by the way, do greater than and equal to as well. You know, you have greater than or equal to or greater than, okay? So actually I may do greater than or equal to because I think that makes a little bit more sense, okay? And so what I'm going to do is my first band is any student who has a score above at 70% or above. Actually, let's do 75. And here I could put 75% or I could just put 0.75. And it's going to give me okay. Now, what you'll notice is all of the students, all of the scores above 75, 75 or above, all are in red. Everything else is in white. Now, here's where this gets interesting. I can have multiple bands. So I'm going to select the same range when the rolling ball stops. I'm going to select the same range. I'm getting frustrating here. Okay. I think the computer is telling me it had enough. Hold on. I'll get it. I'm going to go back to conditional formatting again. Back to greater than. And I'm going to change it again to greater than or equal to. And this time I'm going to do 0.85. Now, I have to change the color band or I'm not going to see anything. And now notice what I have. I have a band. It'll take a second to get clear. I have a band of scores of 74 or below. I have a band of 75 to 85, and then I have a band above that, and presumably I could do a band of 91. So I have a beautiful way of formatting my data based on the information, and it will automatically change it based on color. And watch what happens here. So if the data changes, the color will change. See what I mean? Questions? And in fact, even if my cells are clear, if you're doing a regular report, if I have the formatting there, it'll automatically change it as I enter the data. So I'm going to, when my thing lets me do it, clear my cells, clear some cells. So now I have no contents could be white. As I populate each item, the colors, the appropriate colors. Well, 2% don't work. I only have one. Although I took it anyway, by the way. There we go. All right, questions? Now, there are actually a lot of different rules here. There's a lot of choices. So, for example, one of the choices, this is the lazy person's choice. I'm just clearing the rules. I go in, and instead of selecting bands, I select top bottom rules, and I say just give me the top items. Now here it says top 10, but it doesn't have to be top 10. It could be top 3. So if I wanted to know, for example, the lowest scores in my class, the 3 lowest scores in my class, I could do bottom 3, and it's just going to highlight the 3 lowest scores or the 5 lowest scores. Okay? Questions? Okay, I don't think we're going to have time for, I do want to do data validation for you. I'll pick up time functions the next time we come, but we'll kind of wrap up on data validation, okay, which is how to create drop-down menus, and I'll show you then a really interesting use of this. Okay, so a lot of people say, Jeff, how do you do these drop-down menus? So, for example, when we were doing these count functions, how did you get it to do, to have the word submitted already there, so I don't have to retype it every time, okay? And the answer is data validation. So for those of you who are not familiar with this, I'll just repeat it slowly. So what you have to do is you have to go data validation list. So you got to remember that. Data validation list. And here you're going to get a source area. Now you can either put the items in or a range. The first time around, I'm just going to put the items in. So let's say I have dog, cat, fish. What you're going to notice is once I do that, in that cell, and you're only going to see it when you select the cell, you'll see a little bar, drop-down bar, and if you click that, you get a choice of dog, cat, or fish. Okay, so just to show you that again, you go data, data validation, list, and you're going to do, we'll do apples, oranges, pears. And you hit enter, and now you're going to get apples, oranges, pears. Okay, so there's one challenge with this. Once you create a cell, there's no way to clear it. Okay? So you're stuck with dog, cat, or fish. What if you wanted to go blank? Well, there is a way to do it, but it isn't so obvious. So what you have to do, by the way, if you ever want to edit any of these, all you have to do is go right back into the same cell and just go back to data validate. It'll show the items. What you want to do with a series of items that are in a list that you're typing in your cell is in front of the first item, and the syntax is important. You want to put a dash, that's the lowercase dash, and any word. It could be pick, select, choose. You can even have it blank, but normally you put something. Pick, and then a comma, and you're going to see something different. You're going to see up top the item pick. If you select pick, it's not going to write pick, it's going to leave it blank. So Excel knows that's more just a title and description. It's a way to clear it out. Any questions on that? Everybody okay? And I have no problem going over this again next time, just to lock it in. Okay. But try it. It's not that hard. And I put them all in the template I gave you, so you can certainly try it. Now, there's another interesting way you can do it. In addition to putting the item in the column, into the actual, typing it in manually, another way you can do it, I should have done it first, is to have the items in an array, just in a column. Cat, dog, just blanked me out of Excel. Sorry about that. Let's see if I can reload it. If not, we may have to call it a day, and I'll catch you next time. Showing it. All right. We'll give it one more shot. I'm waiting. I guess the great God of technology wasn't on anybody's side today. How about we call it a day? And I'll pick it up next time. All right? There you go. Yeah. All right, so we'll see you next time. Sorry about that, and I'll make sure that we catch it up. All right? In the meantime, I have the recording of this, and I will start next time by going over data validation again, okay? And kind of giving you a reminder, and we'll go from there. Thanks. Have a wonderful day.